The time is now 6 o'clock, and I call to order this September 4th, 2024 Council Workshop meeting. And please rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we begin, I'll note that there was a school shooting in Winder, Georgia today at Appalachia High School. I don't know the count on the victims at this point. I wasn't able to track down the most current information on that, but I do know that the shooter was a 14-year-old boy who was just slightly older than my son and had access to guns. And we're going to go through the typical cycle, I suppose, in the coming days and weeks, where Democrats call for gun reform. Many Republicans oppose it, and the NRA and gun manufacturers and sellers use it as an opportunity to sell more guns. So I'm hopeful that although we may have disagreements on how to end these school shootings, which, from what I read, only take up 2% of shooting deaths in America. It's a high price to pay, and we need to take action in some way, and we need to find reasonable minds, finding reasonable ground. And I'll continue to remain hopeful. So next is citizens to be heard. If there's anybody here in Borough Hall who wants to follow that, come on up to the podium if you have anything you'd like to raise on borough business. Seeing no one. Do we have anybody by Zoom? No? Okay. Next, the meeting minutes. I'll entertain a motion that council review and approve the July 31st, 2024 public hearing and workshop meeting minutes.
That's so moved.
Motion by the deputy mayor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Mellon. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. I'll also note for the minutes that on July 31st, 2024, council held an executive session to discuss the acquisition of real estate. Next up is presentation on our solid waste municipalization. Mr. DC is here from Sustainable Resources Consulting. Steve, come on up.
Pretty important to keep my laptop. So, thanks for having me out. I'm Steve DC, and I've been doing the solid waste and recycling for about 25 years. It's hard to believe that in 2020 was probably the first recycling project I worked on. Most of that work has been in Pennsylvania, even though I've worked as far away as Saudi Arabia. But most of it's I'd say 80% of the work's very relevant to what this project was about. I want to thank Mark Malich. He's extraordinarily detailed and very thorough in his provision of information. And, I don't always get that from a lot of projects, and I appreciate you guys following up with all those municipalities and carrying on the learning, because this is really complicated. It seems simple when you set your trash out at the curbside, but when you get humans involved, that changes. I'll go over this pretty quickly because I really want to handle the discussion side of it, because it is complicated, so you might want to dive into some specific things. So how do we get this to work? All right, here we go. I have to break this from the beginning. Here we go. All right. All right, so I'm going to talk about, why municipalization in the first place. I mean, to have this discussion, I think you kind of have to get to ground zero on what's going on with the market, the system, and also some other benefits that relate to why you would consider taking on the business of doing trash collection. I'll talk a little bit about conceptual costs, and that word conceptual is highlighted, There's a lot of good detailed information behind those costs, but I think I've put that in the memos that additional information has to be explored to finalize those costs. And then implementation considerations. I mean, if you transition from what the private sector is doing every single day at a very large scale, they're really good at it, and it's complicated. Doesn't mean it's a bad decision. It means that you have to be very thorough. So, um, so why consider municipalization? So, doing this since 2000, um, the market disruption. So I look at the solid waste system as a market. I mean, you've got commodities, which are recyclables, and you've got the landfill side, disposal. They're all operating in the context of really a market. You're flowing, it's logistics where you're taking transportation and you're having services, and they move materials to different locations. So that system operates like a market. So some major disruptions happen. COVID, um, the China Sword Initiative. So in 2018, when we decided, when China decided to ban a lot of the recyclable materials being able to go, we lost our import market. That created a strain on. We don't have enough domestic recyclables processing facilities to manage all the stuff we generate. So those created two things: real harms in terms of actual costs going up because insurances went up and there was labor shortages, and then there's also the opportunity cost, which in the private sector, um, there's the profit margins increased. I don't want to get into the political sides of that, but the reality is it's a leverage opportunity when those disruptions happen, and that's a piece of this discussion. Um, Rapid cost escalations where I remember not long ago running into doing a lot of these analyses where the average household was paying 280, you know, somewhere in that range, per year. Um, I recently got an email. I mean, this was 2 weeks ago for contracts that came back for $670 per household. That's not here. That's Eastern Pennsylvania, but the the change in price has changed a dynamic. So the market, if you go back, 50 years ago, a lot of the landfills, or many of them, were owned by the public sector. Counties operated landfills. Um, the private sector, the large companies, have been in a long process, but more rapidly have been acquiring a lot of the landfill and recycling assets. And so now they're vertically integrated, is what it's called. So if you can do the recycling and you can do the trash and you can do the landfilling and you can run the recyclables processing facility, if you can do all of those things, you have a unique market leverage. So here we are, and um, the market is unique in this area, even different than Pennsylvania, other parts of Pennsylvania, where I would say there's actually some more competition in some areas because Waste Connections owns one of the landfills. They now bought the Penn Waste facility, the recycling facility, and you're sitting smack dab in between those two locations, and so they have a vertically integrated system. And I think one of the evidences of how the market changed was the last time you put out an RFP for services, you got one response. That's not competition. So don't like that answer. Could you have written that specification differently and maybe got competition? You wouldn't have got competition that drove really great pricing, but you could have possibly got another respondent. But that's where the market is. Um, so the procurement leverage issue. So one of my specialties is writing competitive procurement, right? Writing specifications to assure that you go out, you put that service for curbside recycling and say, hey, maybe you want to collect leaves and in the fall and put all those services together in a way that you get competitive procurement results. In the last 5 years, I can't tell you how difficult it is to understand what I get back. We can have three major haulers right next door and only one responds. You can have the one that responds being extremely high. You can sometimes get two, and they're both high. It's just it's hard to leverage procurement because of the market conditions, and those things are important in this discussion because we're trying to figure out, is it worth taking a harder look at at this, potentially taking over and doing some of this in-house. So, conceptual costs. I'm going to review private hauler costs, and in the context of what you're paying now, and also in Cumberland County. Talk a little bit about capital costs. Those are the real costs that you would incur to buy trucks and do, maybe even, renovate your public works building so you can, have staff in there, and then talk a little bit about what the annual operating costs would be, and then get into a little bit of cost details. Hope to avoid that, a little bit. Oh, this is cool. Let's get all that in there. So the current cost that residents are paying is around $320 per year. So I'm just going to give you my professional opinion on how that cost arrived and why it's not very representative of your cost. So the way that you put your specification together last time had some specific services in there: bag collection, wanting to have the extra additional bags paid in service. There were some things in there that haulers didn't like. The haulers and the big companies right now is doing what I call shaping the market. They're deciding, hey, I don't want that service. I'm not going to bid on that, or they will, because they're looking at the big picture. Um, what I believe, this is just my opinion, what I believe occurred was that Waste Connections, who's just buying up the infrastructure around here, looked at what they thought they could be competitive and be sure that they won the bid. And then they also were allowing to compromise and give you the services you want, this type of structure that you're having. They're trying to get away from bag collection. The industry is moving towards safer, semi-automated collection using carts. So they gave you what is a great price because they were going to win that bid, and they will be your contractor next time and next time and next time. That's my opinion because I've seen what penetrating the market looks like. Keep in mind that 320 has their profit margin in there. In residential collection, that profit margin can be 10% to 25%, depending on a whole bunch of different dynamic factors and what they own and what they don't. So on the other side of this slide is the um, contracted trash fees. So I went out, I know Justin Miller really well from the county, and I talked to him, and then I figured out who was doing contracts, who did the recent ones, and I surveyed them, and I went and talked to a bunch of municipalities who have recently got service in the county. So the real cost of recently executed contract for similar services to what you have is about $420 a household. And the reason I present that is because when you're trying to look at financial justification and understand the true cost of what you're doing, you should be comparing not the price that you have now if it's not the real representative price of what other municipalities are doing. So the 420 is more in line with where we are now. And if you go to the end of your contract and rebid, if nobody hears that I'm having this presentation, you will probably get about 450 is where you're going to be. So that you just need to understand that the price, um, and that relates to something also very important, is that cost of $1.9 million a year, $2 million a year, which ironically is very consistent with where, when we did the math on capital costs investments, it actually came out to be the same. And I think they're like, I do a lot of, does this pass the lab test? I'm like, well, if a hauler's really good at it and they can do it for cheaper, but you're a municipality and you can't do it as good, but you're not putting a profit margin in, where's that going to fall? It's going to be kind of about, there's some, it passes the laugh test, and it also passes a laugh test when I looked at, I was just looking at on my phone the technical memo that you guys put together, and the prices that other municipally operated programs are $300 to $350 per household per year. That means that's what they're charging their customers to pay for those costs. So the good news is the work that we did. It's like reasonable to assume we're in the ballpark um, with the costs. Um, the bag fee system that you have, which I won't advocate that you do that anymore for a bunch of reasons, but wouldn't take that service away because some people love it, but I would just modify and make some recommendations on that. But the bag fees, because the waste industry doesn't want to do that, they're $34 for the additional bags. I mean, that's basically saying we're trying to force customers to really not do that. That's what that cost is. It's a really high cost. Um, so the price to compare is more of a 415 to 460, and about $2.5 million. So if we look at capital cost applied from what the work that we did, and for everybody's knowledge, I decided to not do this work entirely myself. I brought in um, a borough manager that ran a trash program, that ran a public works system, and I worked with him in consultation together because I don't like making things up. I knew you were going to have questions about, well, how many staff are we actually using to run this program? And so he helped me with the distribution of these costs in the framework of him running a solid waste program. So these allocations of costs are reasonable. Sure, labor is going to make up the biggest component of that. Tipping fees falls around 15%. Um, One of the questions was, hey, well, what if the disposal fees go way up? So, because I love doing this trash thing, I thought about it. I'm like, well, think about it like this. You have 6,000 households. If the price of disposal goes up from 500, or I mean, goes up from 50 to $100, that's 50 more dollars per ton. You're generating about $3,000 or 3,000 tons a year. So you increase your cost by $150,000 per year. That's not even one recycling truck that you're talking about. So 150,000, if you divide it by your 6,000 households, the paying customers, and you divide that by months, that would increase their cost only by $2 a month. And so that's the laugh test type thing is like, yeah, disposal might go up because you're not really in control of that. But because all the other collection side, the labor makes up most of the cost, even in the worst case scenario, your disposal costs double, which I do not expect. It's not that big of a deal on the trash bill. Does that make sense? So I was just trying to say, well, how big, what is that going to be? Because at the end of the day, you're asking for that money from the customer. So trucks make up a lot of that cost, but through the Act 101 recycling grant, you get $250,000 back every other year, and you could go after reimbursement. So you go after 250,000 and then 500. So eventually, over a period of maybe 8 years, you get a lot of your money back on the recycling side of the equation, and then you're also getting 904 recycling performance grants, which you get about $40,000 a year. So the trash fees, and again, it's just coincidental that the revenue um, aligns to the $2 million. You have 6,000 units. One thing just to make it even more complicated, a number of municipalities that go down this road, they actually do some service of the commercial sector. Commercial sector dumpsters, it's a higher profit. And it's like, hey, if we've got the infrastructure and the trucks, why don't we expand that? I'm not recommending you do that. I'm just saying it's another piece of the revenue equation for some municipalities. Um, Staffing, you know, we are looking at 2-man crews. the trucks, our costs were based on 5-year loan payments. The repairs, so I surveyed a bunch of municipalities and just made sure that I'm in the ballpark. I wouldn't recommend that you hire mechanics. I would recommend that you get a good mechanic shop or two, and then you just set up a contractual arrangement, because they're better at it. It's hard to keep an on-site truck mechanic, and that's a pretty high cost. Um, and then you do routine maintenance with your own um, staff, with your CDL drivers. Um, the cost that we projected, they reflect going to a CARTS program. Um, I'm a CARTS guy, and so is the entire nation is moving that direction. They look cool, but the main reason is safety. Like, going around your neighborhoods and picking up trash, including letting dogs get into the trash. Um, yes, it can work, and yes, it's been done, all over the country and done for years. But when you have technology that can help you lift, and cart doesn't mean you have to have the big arm that goes out, and you don't have room for that, because some of your areas in the borough are too tight for that. It's there's a lot of configurations. So one of the configurations, it's a regular wheel load packer truck that you could throw into the back, but it has two like candy cane lifts, and then the worker just wheels the cart over, snaps it, walks back over, gets the other. By the time he hits that button and comes back, he's got another cart and goes back, and then you can do dual side. And so, yes, there's manual working and going and get it, but the cuts, the punctures, the slips and falls that you have, if you watch trash people do trash, they don't ever listen to the way they're supposed to do it. They're throwing them across, they're throwing you the bag, trying to get it done as fast. And so I'm a safety guy, because just liability in this industry and people getting hurt, it's a huge priority. Um, and for the programs that we've rolled out, you're always going to find somebody that complains about something, but if you give them diverse cart size and some options, when it gets rolled out, it looks really nice in your community. When everything is labeled a trash cart and everything is distinguished as a recycling cart, it does look good, and it's also reimbursable through the grant program. Another thing is that they have lids and moisture. A lot of people are paying for rainwater in their disposal fees. So you go and you keep your trash out, and you get 2 inches of rain that night, and then they go dump it, and then you go to the landfill, and you just paid for a lot of rainwater. So you add that up over years of collection, um, having lids to keep vectors out, and to also avoid paying for moisture content is not a bad idea.
Hey, Stephen, uh, real quick question on your last chart there before we leave it. The tipping fee, just so I'm clear, are landfills regulated so that they have to charge the same tipping fee even if they own and operate the same vehicles? Or is it, or
It's a market. They can charge whatever they want.
so the
So they
assumption of
typically,
$55 a ton is based on
it's based
tip?
on knowing it's based on knowing transfer station tip fees around this area, and me making professional observations about, hey, what is York County doing? What did um, Shippensburg, who just got a contract for waste disposal, what is their contracted fee? Looking at those market forces and saying, hey, well, we're not in eastern Pennsylvania where it's 75 or 80. We're here. We have York. We have a transfer station. We have a couple competing for like Noble and Environmental. So there's some competing forces that keep it in check. It's like Western PA is like 35, 45, 55. Like, that's common out there for disposal per ton. We're kind of in the middle, and Eastern PA gets really expensive.
Thank you for that. For a given landfill, though, they can't charge different tipping fees for different haulers. Is that correct?
Yes, they can. So they can do
It's
whatever they
amazing.
want.
It's amazing.
like so meaning if I'm a hauler that comes across and I'm servicing multiple municipalities, I have a discussion and say, hey, I'm going to bring you this much volume. Let's have a contractual rate so I get a better price, right? I'm trading off like, hey, I'm going to send you more of my stuff. I'm not going to run to York. I'll take it to Cumberland County landfill. Give me a better deal. And then they leave some of their capacity available so they could get what's called spot market. And then they have what's called gate rates. So when they post a gate rate, like if you and I drive across the street, or if I'm a hauler that brings a trash truck, but I don't have a full contract in place, I'll usually get charged the gate rate, which is a posted. It's like your billing rate schedule as a consultant. It's your posted fee.
I think the main thing that we are all thinking is, you know how they wanted to charge $34 for a bag because they didn't want that service, right? The same thing. What if we take their business away and we also have to pay the tipping fee for the company that we no longer are have a contract with? So the question is, what's the possibility of them giving us an absorbent like number?
Well, that's why I was kind of doing the laugh test on. So the main thing to understand is, so I use a term called like active management. So when you're proactively managing this system, you're trying to control as much as you can. Well, fortunately, on the collection side, and it's kind of reflected back in that pie chart, most of the cost is rolled up into the actual activity of collecting the trash. So when they do crazy and they decide to make it $100 a ton, that's still $2 a month to your customer. And so you're trying to do all of these other things to actively control those costs. I don't expect that to be the case, but they're kind of doing that now anyway. So like even in your so the question is like, so I'm a liability risk guy. The problem is the 320 that you have now. What leverage do you have now to control that the whole contract price isn't going to go up? And that's, as me as a consultant, I've never been able to sit at a meeting like this and be like, I'm really kind of freaked out right now that this is the way it's going. Like when I have a customer email me and say, we got bids back and it was 670. I thought I would be like with a cane by the time I saw a price like that. So um, control what you can control, actively manage what you can manage. I'm not saying it's easy, but you don't have any more control um, over your like actively controlling your contract price, unless you start abandoning like, hey, well, we don't want you to do as much service and things like that. Um, and to your point, I still have a question for clarity because I saw that before. What do you mean by the tipping fee going away? Like it doesn't. You're not taking anything away from them. You still have to go to a landfill to dispose of it. Somebody's getting their disposal fee. You still have to drive across the scale with your truck.
Can I just? Yeah, I'm going to try to ask a question maybe more pointedly. You talked about the vertical integration, which effectively creates pretty close to sort of a local monopoly,
Correct.
right? And so if I'm one of those companies, not without naming names, if I'm one of those companies and I have that vertical integration, there's not anything in the regulations that prohibits me from, for the same tipping service, same contract, um, having a higher tipping fee for a non-affiliated company than I have for my affiliated company. If I understand how if it's a company that has that vertical integration, it's the same company throughout those entities. Is that correct? I may be getting into too much business
Well,
entity nuance, but
I mean,
so
that's a loaded question, but if you just think about it like this, Waste Connections, and it doesn't matter if you get into how many subsidiaries. So they do liability protection by creating shell companies and subsidiary companies to do all of the different facets of their business. But if it's waste management, to me, it's still waste management, even if it's got Waste Management Inc., because they decided to make that the recycling facility. But what I mean by vertically integrated is they own a landfill, they own a recyclables processing facility, and they own the hauling. So they got you coming and going. And the problem with that is they make the numbers the way they want. They don't care about, they could have given you your service for free, thinking about what they want to be doing in this market 10 years later. And just to, just because this is fun for me, I decided to go look at Waste Connections information. And if you look at their market share, does anybody have a guess of what they're worth right now? Because how many landfills do you think Waste Connections has just like bought lately? Like how many do you think they own? I mean, they trade them like baseball cards. They own over 100 landfills. So the idea that Carlisle is on their radar in the way that we're thinking about it, they are a $67 billion company. They'll do this for free for 20 years and never notice that it happened to their books. So that's why I'm sitting here concerned, is because, and having more people approach me, we don't want our trash bill to be $600. So these kind of conversations are coming up. I'm not saying you even do this. I'm saying it's a great time to be considering the future. And if I'm a resident, I live right down the road in Silver Spring Township, and I spend a lot of time drinking beer at your bars. So Carlisle has really come a long way. It's got some interesting things going on. Um, from a personal perspective, I want my taxpayer dollars going in and thinking about my long-term services, quality of services. Um, and and let me speak to that point, just anecdotally, what I've observed in doing the business of trash collection. So what's the difference between private and public sector? My observation in nearly every case is established, municipally provided service. The residents love it. They just like the fact that it's their crews, that their municipality got involved, got people employed, and they're seeing the same people and they're well trained. I'm not saying it's probably harder now from the staffing side, the post COVID getting good labor. I'm not saying that's easy, but nearly every program that has been established that puts out that's trying to invest in doing that, it's really well received by the community. That's just what I observe over and over and over again. And then what do I observe on the private side consistently? Really long complaint logs and trash carts and trash left in the streets and all these things that just don't quite get addressed. And what I'm seeing lately as a trend in contracts is the enforcement side. It used to be, it was a little bit more cooperative. Even the big companies would, work pretty well. And I'm not trying to, these are observations. I'm not trying to throw any companies under the bus. It's just observations. They have technology now is customer service. That's what they're using. Go ahead and try to fix something on your bill, and you'll go through 19. I mean, I'm doing it now with my own service. So you don't have a human at the other end to resolve that. You have issues with carts being left in the street. It's hard to resolve some of that. And my observation is it's hard to enforce those contracts with these bigger companies. It just is. Like I mean, I don't have anything against anyone's individuals, but these are just observations. It's
I'm
why
gonna
we're having this discussion.
sorry to be a dog with a bone here. I'm going to circle back to my question a little bit, just to understand that, because I find sort of the economics of it interesting too. But if I'll use Looney Tunes company, Acme, right? So if Acme Landfill Inc. and there's Acme Hauler Inc. and then Acme Landfill Inc. services municipalities, other private haulers, and so forth. Acme Landfill Inc. could charge Acme Hauler Inc. one rate and then charge everybody else a higher rate if it worked, understanding that some of those private haulers and other haulers could potentially go elsewhere depending on how far out that is, right?
Yeah.
But there's no regulation prohibiting that. Is that, do, and it may be a question you can't answer, but
Well,
if
I
you know.
mean, I, I have not seen a state. I mean, that would be states. So states, that the state's main regulation is permitting landfills. right? And that's making sure they do an annual operations report, submitting that, and then there's some state regulations about some reporting requirements, but regulating their what they charge their customers. I have never seen. Now there's host municipality fees. If you're, there's some other minor state related fees built into landfill tipping fees. It amounts to about $7.50 a ton. It's a series of little fees, and Act 101's even built into that. But no, most of the structure is you got your posted gate rate, and you come in. Are you taking me residual waste? What type of waste are you taking me? And how much are you taking? And then they work out a contractual arrangement for that. And I have a lot of customers. Mifflin County. I just did their solid waste plan, and they have a transfer station, and so I know their fee structures and how that works. So I've never seen. Now I know because of the things that I'm talking about. I know the state is actually investigating a little bit of this because they're also concerned about the market
Well, that's
transition.
good. That's good.
It is until they call me.
This may be an issue. PML might have some interest in advocating for. Energy utilities, obviously, a monopoly used to charge different fees to use their transmission and distribution lines. Federal agency eventually said no, you can't do that. You have to post consistent fees. Everybody gets to use your common carrier. And as we're consolidating, waste into a natural monopoly, it seems like that's probably something that needs to go down a similar road here.
It's very interesting, and I think you hit it on the head. I mean, so I would love everybody to think about solid waste services. That's think about it like a utility. I mean, you need water, you need trash disposal. So there's in Pennsylvania, it's a very heated topic, especially in the rural counties that I do a lot of work in. This is a really hot topic. Don't mess with the private sector, and it goes on and on. And there are valid arguments, and there should be passion. If you want to pay $1 million, for if you want to pay a high price, you should have the right to do that. But the way it behaves demands management like a utility because it has implications that go beyond the generator, the household, the commercial generators. These impacts are environmental, widespread. They even cross the border and they go other places. So I think about it as a utility, and then you can also look at known cost and create a rate, right? The rate that the 320, the 350 that it costs is based on being financially responsible and doing the due diligence behind costs. So from that perspective, I think it's a good thing to say is are in full control of revenue sufficiency. Meaning, I don't see municipalities that do this just all of a sudden can't find enough money because as long as they're doing the math and doing their budgets, um, they know what it costs, they know the trucks that they need to run, and they know their true costs. So they just adapt the trash fee to fit the revenue sufficiency need. So that's different. Some other things that you get into. Sometimes you get into projects and you're like, oh man, we didn't have enough money. Um, did I cover everything? Do we have any more questions? Specific questions? There were some other more detailed slides on costs, but I'm not sure. I don't know if that's where. I mean, I don't know how much value it is to dive into. Um, Want me to dive? I mean, is there anything I guess that people are particularly interested in cost details? Um, so maybe we talked about this, or I talked about this probably more. Um, yeah, so this is more just saying currently. So years ago, I wasn't having these meetings because I said, hey, the private sector could do it for cheaper. Operational considerations and recommendations.
Could you go back to the two slides back, the current revenue and then projected expenses? just for especially because we are trying to educate our public as well. So if you could give the overview of the slide.
Yeah, I mean, I think I will just keep this simple because again, this was Craig helped put some of this together, but I think the main takeaway is um, looking at how close your revenue requirements are to the $320 that is being. Meaning, if you charge 6,000 residents $320, you're going to recover about $2 million. And we go back to that pie chart that has all your capital expenses. That's 5 collection trucks and looking at all your staff. You're around a $2 million system. Is I think just to keep it as it's simple. Um, and most of those projected expenses just relate to how loans for trucks, and how those things change. So I don't know if that was super helpful. Um, so operational considerations. Okay, this is again. I know that I actually did a study for the Carlisle Borough when it had a pay as you throw program. Was looking at the bag system, and there was a lot of passion here in this community about using pay as you throw systems. So there's kind of makes sense. If you conserve and try to recycle really well, you pay a little bit less. Um, so operationally, I would be recommending that you would do a hybrid pay as you throw program. So, and how does that work? So hybrid pay as you throw as a cart program, the incentive is that you have tiered cart pricing. So if I have a 96-gallon tote for trash, that represents a core part of my service. And then you're always going to get a recycling container with that cart. But if I wanted to buy another, if I needed an additional, if I was 4, 5, 6 people in my household, if I wanted to buy another trash cart, I could. I paid for that service, but it would be prorated. And the reason you prorate it to around 70% is because the truck's already coming to that stop. So you're really paying for that, covering that disposal side of the cost. And so the incentive there to recycle is you get some customization. If I'm a small family and I've only got, it's me and my wife and we're older and we don't generate too much trash, maybe I need a 64-gallon trash cart and a recycling container. So you're incentivizing recycling because you're giving them the capacity, but you're having a tiered price structure. So it works like a pay as you throw, but you have the cart as an asset to keep things clean and to allow your workers to work safe. So
Do you know any communities are doing exactly that right now in Pennsylvania?
there's a lot of tiered
That
cart. Yeah, I think like Cranberry Township
okay.
is one throughout Pittsburgh. Yeah, it's actually a very common. Nationally, it's very common, and it makes sense, right? It makes sense. It's like you're using more service, you pay a little bit more, but you still got to drive by their house and pick up their stuff, so you can do some pretty intelligent, intuitive prorating of the container sizes. Um,
Years ago, I'd seen somewhere where, and I wish I could find where it was, where they had carts and trucks capable of weighing the trash, and then your cost would be somewhat based on the weight of the trash, which then encourages people to either recycle or reduce. Have you seen any examples of that? Yeah,
I've seen everything. Just about
probably
the trash. So Recycle Bank was a program out in Philly, and they had basically a credit system, and it would weigh. It has technology in the truck. It has an RFID chip. It's linked to your address, and that's all. As a matter of fact, when you buy recycling carts now, it's hard to not get them with RFID technology in them because at minimum you're linking the asset, the cart, to the address because you don't want people stealing your stuff and you want to at least be able to track and inventory your containers. So that's all in there, and then the next step of that is linking it to software that would be like weighing. So um, I don't think you're doing that here. I don't think you need to do that. I think the type of hybrid system when you have dense collection, um, you'll get a lot of great data when your trucks are going across scale, you'll know so much good data about pounds per household and participation. Your drivers will be telling you, hey, so and so hasn't put out recycling for 3 weeks. So you'll have a lot of good data. I'm not saying that's not valuable in some aspects, but that's more of like a recently designed community that's more of a suburb with fully automated system. Um, Different, you know, you can always explore it. I just don't. I wouldn't recommend it. So truck specifications. I mean, if we want to get into this, this is really getting into the nitty gritty of how you design and operate a system. Um, right now, I think the drivers there's three staff persons per truck, which is very atypical. But when you're a big company and you pull labor ready staff, I don't know if you're familiar with labor ready, but it's basically like temp staff are filling in the void, and they're running around trying to do collection really fast, which is not what I would recommend. I would say efficient, steady, safe, redundant, do all those things. Um, and then you move to the semi-automated trash collection with carts. Your routes are going to be a little bit smaller. Instead of doing, 700 trash units, you're doing 600 households with trash. Now,
I wanted,
recycling goes a lot faster.
Steve, I want to ask you a little bit about that. You touched briefly on the fact we could expand this to commercial entities. Can you briefly comment on how potentially advantageous it would be to sort of the model if we made a municipal service to try to really incentivize commercial businesses to be part of this?
Yeah, so there's two aspects. So there's commercial and then there's small business. So small business to me is absolutely, you want to roll them in as if they're resident. You got a little barber shop, right? He's going to generate regular amount of trash. You basically specify the quantity as long as you generate a residential level set trash and get our container, you can buy in to the residential service package, and then they just get added on your route. So it's a super efficient. It's a great courtesy to the businesses, and they get rolled in, and it's good. Commercial collection means to me dumpster collection. Are you providing 2 yard, 4 yard, 6 yard, and 8 yard dumpsters? And that's usually like a front load. So it changes maybe your equipment configuration, not necessarily, because sometimes they're rear load but it can be very profitable because it's dumpster service. You know, I wouldn't tell the market that we would be looking into that because they like that profit margin. So, and on that note, there's some comments on that I need to look at on my phone here from the key takeaways from the survey. So I need to touch on that because I want to address each of those. It's really great that you guys did the research, but I'll get back to that. Shippensburg would tell you in response to you, and I'm not saying Shippensburg has like the greatest program, but they love the fact that they get commercial business, and that's a huge part of why they can help kind of keep their residential costs so low, right? So you can, because you're actively managing the system, you add some commercial customers in there, you get a larger profit margin, you look at your overall revenue sufficiency model, and maybe you can keep your residential trash bill a little bit lower. That's one way to look at it. It's just something else to explore.
If I may add, you'll see in staff's research memo that when we engaged with Chambersburg, I believe, if I'm correct, they have about 700 commercial um, customers. And I think the largest permitted container is a 4 yard. They charge about $15 a yard to their commercial customers. And I believe I'm looking down at Richard and Jeff on this one. They did say that you have to get a waiver, right? As far as if you're a commercial property and do not want to elect to be in the program, or am I incorrect on that?
I thought that as well.
So that helps a little bit. So just some other important implementation considerations. This is the one I don't have answers for. So hiring in this market is uniquely challenging. Um, the the onboarding side, right? So to get into this business, there's actually going to be some time that you would want to hire all your crew and your managers and kind of figure this thing out, because the last thing you want to do is on day one of collections, um, you you start and you're missing a lot of stops and you make a real mess of it. So you're gonna have to practice running the routes, understand what those are. Before that, you need to be driving and understanding what is waste management doing right now. What are those exact routes, and try to mimic those to start. It doesn't mean you make, and you'll probably will have to make modifications because your performance won't be the same. The amount of time to figure all that stuff out, I don't know the answer. The amount of cost that you have to eat to figure that out, I don't know those answers. Good to explore. Um, Recyclables processing and disposal contracts. I write these things all the time. I don't know how your recyclable. Are you just giving your recyclables away right now to the hauler? Like, it's just built in. They're not like rebating you. There's no CPI index tied. So like when you go to do this for recyclables processing, you want to write an intelligent, specification that leverages market conditions. So recyclables.net is a nationally recognized commodities market, and then you have the structure of the contract so that you're getting rebated when you take those materials to the processor. You've got a fixed residue price. That means the contamination portion is under contract. I'm not going to pay more than $60 a ton for the contamination. And then you have a commodity price index that's tied to recyclablesmarket.net, so that when those commodities are doing really well and they're making the processors doing really well, they're willing to share some of that revenue. And so you just have to structure that and work that out so that you're not paying the full. Hey, we dropped your recyclables off. It's $100 a ton. You want to be a little bit more, um, thoughtful about that contract. The disposal contract, you put that out, and you try to get at least a couple, two, three to respond. There is a transfer station in Mechanicsburg. I don't know if they will allow you to tip there, but you're not so big. It might be worth a discussion, because distance is going to be the challenge. You don't want to take it too far. The distance, running to Chambersburg, running to York. You just have to vet those arrangements and do the contract analysis to see what's the better deal when you're considering what is the disposal fee and what is the logistic impacts of transportation. So, but that's just a 1 or 2 page, solicitation. Hey, what's it going to cost us to take it to your landfill? And they'll just give you a price per ton and give you some rules and you got to follow. Implementing documents, ordinances, education, web portal. You get into the administrative side of things, and customers are going to want to be able to register and know where to get their cards and pick what card sizes. The education side is twofold. It's once you're doing it, but this is part of the initial phase, and that's where I'm going to pull out my phone and look at these key takeaways from your observations, because I think it's worth commenting on a couple of them. And some of them are subtle but very important. So look here. So key takeaway. This is the research that who did this? Susan. Good job, collective. We should go. I mean, you guys could be subs. I will hire you soon. So I'll just go through these, and then one I want to highlight. So, more than the others. Redundancy of equipment and staff, consistent and timely operations. So what is redundancy in equipment to me? First of all, absolutely yes. It's a critical takeaway. It means buying and operating the same truck chassis, the same equipment. Why does that matter? Because when you take that to a maintenance guy, it's the same thing. Why? So many programs I've seen, they've got something that's 20 years old or 4 years old, and they're Mac versus different types of. That creates chaos and breakdowns, and the last thing you want is when you're out in the street is your trash truck sitting there and it's not working. So all of those things come back to really be beneficial to be very consistent buying and operating the same stuff. And then it's easier to train your staff. And it's safer for them. So that's a very important takeaway. Um, the transition from this is kind of the one we're talking about. Just it's subtle, but it's really important. Transition from the contractor to in-house is difficult, especially if the contractor is not professional. So having a good transition in place will be beneficial. So wait till 6,000 households get letters from Waste Connections or other waste haulers or the PWI, and they create a story about what this all looks like. It's hard to navigate. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I've seen it happen a lot. So you have to create really strong relationships with people, do the stakeholder engagement. Be really, I'd keep everything internal as long as you can to really formulate strong direction, because when that cat is out of the bag, they will come. And you won't know, but the publicity side, the legal side, all sorts of sides. Just my experience. Anytime you try to change and shape the market on the municipal side, it can get really, and that's saying something. I mean, that there's a little clue into there, of the truth of the situation. So just be armed, create great relationships with your news and your media, get all your conversation pieces lined up. Don't say more than you need to, and just be very focused, because, I mean, it's very hard, but if you do that, most of the programs that I've seen, the customers are very happy. It takes 3 to 6 months for some of the noisy people who are mad they have a 64-gallon cart instead of a 35-gallon cart. I mean, that will be a problem sometimes. But if that's the biggest thing, and you just save them, $100 a year or more, and you're actively managing that system. So I just want to tell you that stuff's real, and it can become. It has stopped more projects than I can count. Just how they navigate that stuff. So be aware, be prepared, educate inside first. A similar sized operation in Phoenixville has full-time dedicated director, assistant director, 2 supervisors, and administrative side. So my comment to that is, I think that's, in my observation, a little more admin than necessary. It's also, they have 8,500 households, so they are quite a bit bigger. You have to dive into the details of what they're actually doing. I don't think that's the administrative staffing level is consistent, because you have a lot of that capacity. There's ways to divvy up some of that with an existing house and to streamline things through like your web portal so that your administration is clean. So I don't think that's super representative of the admin side of this business, but it's worth noting for sure. Chambersburg hiring plan. Won't get into the details of it, but yes, you should put hiring incentives in place. I think you should debate union versus non-union. My opinion, just my opinion. I love unions for some things. I worked with UPS. My better half is a teacher, and there are absolutely great reasons for a union. I think for a small municipality trying to do the business of trash, you don't need a union. I think it's another layer. But I do think you need a great hiring plan. You need to put together a pension plan and a program to make sure these staff are really protected and taken care of. I mean, that's what you want. I mean, you want them to become part of a good, solid municipal program and on board for the long term. And if you have assumptions that, you know, trash people, you know, trash workers only work at programs for a couple of years and just quit, that's not really what I've seen. Most of the places, the trash people have been there forever. So now, what that's like now post-COVID, I don't know the answer, but I'm saying most of the time we have a good program. The staff stick around for a long time, and then they work their way up and become managers. And so you have to pay them well, pay them more than you think you're going to have to pay a trash collector, but that's okay. You just have to make the math work. That was number 5, and then develop a comprehensive business plan. I'm not a financial advisor, just a sell-waste guy. So, absolutely, work out the detail. The way that I approach a lot of these costs is I just get the real costs. I put an RFP or I talk to vendors and I say, hey, can you put us a proposal if we're going to buy these following, 3 trash trucks? Can you give us a quote? We're going to buy these, can you give us a quote? So I go through that stuff that way, but you certainly need financial and business plan to take it to the next phase if you want. Another detail, I don't know why this is popping into my head, there's some other implementation things that I think about is I think your contract right now ends in a probably a January, like a December cycle. It's probably like a December 31st. So consider if you're going to do like a renewal extension, consider negotiating that contract ends in the spring. Because if you would ever take this over and say it takes you 3 years to figure this out and move that direction, and it might. Honestly, it might. You want to start trash collection, and I try to make all of the contracts I do start in the spring. Now, we have much more mild winters, but you want to have a bad day, wait till your first day of collection is in January 1st or right around the holidays in the winter, and then you're trying to figure out trash collection. It's not ideal. So that's just like a little best practice I've learned over the years. Try to have your contracts in the spring. Everybody's happy. Birds are fluttering around. Trash is easier to collect. Anybody have any questions?
Looks like no, Steve. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for putting up with all the questions we peppered you with in the middle of all that and we hijacked your presentation.
No, it's okay. I'm glad you're asking questions. So it's very complicated.
That was very helpful and informative. Thank you so much.
You may.
I think so. I think so.
We're going to be about another 5 minutes, I think, but you can take off. Thank you. Thanks, Steve. Next, before I get into this, I'm not sure I stayed in connection with the email thread that was going about for the voting delegate for the resolutions committee and annual business meetings for PML. Do we have somebody?
You actually have 3 council members, I believe, that are attending.
Oh, wow.
Correct, Patricia, or is it 2? Okay.
2.
And the 2 are?
Do either of you care who the voting delegate and who the alternate is? There you go.
What? Okay.
Okay. So then I'm looking for a motion to appoint Sophronia Perry as the voting delegate and Brenda Landis as the alternate delegate to the PML 2024 Resolutions Committee and annual business meetings that shall be held during the Pennsylvania Municipal League's 2024 Municipal Leadership Summit from October 10th through October 13th, 2024. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Councilor Hicks. Is there a second?
Second.
second by Counselor Stubbe. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. Next, under public safety, I move that council authorize the closure of West Church Avenue between South Pitt Street and South Courthouse Avenue on Saturday, September 21st, 2024, from 7 a.m. until 12 a.m. midnight. Technically, that's on the 22nd, for a gala celebrating the 85th anniversary of the Carlisle Theater. Carlisle Regional Performing Arts Center shall be responsible for 100% of the variable cost and 10% of the fixed cost for this event. Is there a second? Councilor Roos is missing, so I need somebody to pick me up here.
Second.
Second by Councilor Hicks. Is there any discussion? I know the theater is in the midst of its capital campaign. It'll be an exciting event for them. I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. And then land use reform. Jared, you have an update for us.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. I don't have a fancy presentation tonight. But I did want to, I guess, give you an update from the last time we had a workshop. Staff submitted the MAP grant application for small area planning for East High Street in York and North Hanover. Land Use Reform Subcommittee is looking at some of the more boring but really important parts of accessory dwelling units in terms of, making some changes to our rental program, basically to deal with short-term rentals. I think it was brought up at one of our original meetings that by creating a new small-scale housing market within the borough, we might also have an unintended consequence of, inducing a short-term rental market. So we'll be bringing forth a report in October about our rental program, kind of how it's working, successes, and maybe some places that ought to be improved. And hopefully by that time we'll have some recommendations on short-term rentals. The artisan industry land use that we talked about, the land use reform subcommittee sort of settled on about a limit of 10,000 square feet of space dedicated to that use, with a limit of employees of 10 employees or less, and accommodating that artisan industry or artisan manufacturing use in the C1, the Central Business District. And nothing's changed as far as the bike parking recommendation. We're holding fast at 2 bike spots for every 10 parking spaces for new development. And that's my report.
Thank you, Jared. Any questions for Jared? No. Next is new business. So if you were too shy earlier in the meeting, you can have another opportunity to provide any comment to council on borough business. But you don't have anything for us tonight. Okay. Thank you. And we still don't have anybody by Zoom. Okay. Then hearing nothing further, this meeting.
Mr. Mayor,
I'm sorry.
yeah, I just want to add, this is my last in-person meeting I'll have as a council member of the Carlisle Borough. Probably not a big secret, but 22nd July, I interviewed for a job at the University of Oregon. On the 24th of July, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I knew a year ago that it was a possibility that if I wanted to teach, and I would need to go where the jobs were. I looked in the area as much as I could, and this was the first, I think, really good match that I had. So I'm very sad that I will be leaving this position. As I look at Andy, Amy, Andrea, Jeff, Jared, Richard. I mean, what a team we have. Susan has built here, and I'm very confident whoever ends up sitting in this position is going to have the best team they possibly can to move forward on all these projects we have in our strategic plan, our climate action plan, our comprehensive plan. This borough's in great shape. I'm going to miss being part of that. I know whoever's going to be here is going to do a great job, and we have a lot of people in this community care deeply about making Carlisle a place people want to come live. So this isn't goodbye, but it's goodbye from this podium, and I'll see you all probably at least in a year, and I'll let you know if Oregon is maybe quack. The Ducks are a place I might end up being for a little while. But thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. I was expecting one more meeting out of you, so I'm sorry. We were kind of prepared to.
This is my last in-person meeting,
Right. Well, I
so
mean
I do have
in
one more
person.
meeting,
So
and
we'll
I just
still.
wanted to be able to look,
We'll,
especially these people over here in the eye, and say thank you for being just a fantastic staff and making my job a lot easier. Thanks.
we'll regale you remotely next week, but I'll just and Joel, you and I, and I'll probably say this again next week. But you and I haven't always seen eye to eye on everything, but we always saw eye to eye on one thing, that was doing everything we could to improve this borough. And you are the father of the Carlisle Climate Action Plan. And if there were nothing else, and I said this by email, it was an impressive haul that you pulled off, and that's going to have lasting impact. And I'll go into more of that next week. But appreciate all the efforts that you've provided this borough during your tenure here. Okay, now for real, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.